And good day, folks. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town, coming to you from the Fresno studios right here in sunny California. We're talking about, is Trump a fascist? Or is he a patriot? Depends on which newscast you listen to, frankly. If you tune into CNN, he's a fascist. Of course, they're known for taking things out of context, for taking just a little piece of what he says, not putting it in context. I don't know. For me, it's not a very big question. I don't know how they can come to some of their conclusions. Today, I am joined by a friend of mine that kind of brought up this idea, that how do we battle the disinformation, the propaganda of the left? Well, I think the answer to free speech you don't like is more free speech. So we're here exercising our free speech. Today I'm joined by a fellow patriot, somebody that's a constitutionalist, much like myself. Welcome, Bill Scott.
Well, thank you. Eric asked me here today after we were talking, like he said, about some of the things that are being said on TV, on any of the newscasts, and people believe it, and it's wrong. I'm absolutely amazed at who will believe this stuff. What kind of brought it to the front with me is my hobby's model trains, and I went to a convention in San Luis Obispo. Well, most of the people that came to that convention came from the Bay Area.
Ugh.
And
it's a beautiful area, but ugh.
Exactly. I don't know. Their thought process is just so destroyed. Most of them have college degrees. They've been to college. They had jobs that were very responsible. These are intelligent people.
Well, and they're at a trained convention. How could they not be trained?
Well, that's just it. They're all trained by these colleges that teach them nonsense, and they believe it. It's just been part of their lives. And I hear them say these things. You've all heard in the last year this thing about Trump is going to destroy our democracy. That's the one that absolutely floors me. How can an intelligent, educated person believe that?
Well, didn't he do that in his first term?
Well, there's not just that. It's the phrase, the word. There is this kernel of truth to what they're saying. It depends on how you define the word our, right? It's going to destroy their democracy in favor of the American constitutional republic. They've got it in their head that this is a democracy. Well, no, it's not. The founding fathers were very adamant that we not have a democracy. And the reason why is the actual word democracy, this definition, I like to explain it as 5 wolves and 3 chickens voting on what we're going to have for dinner tonight.
But didn't they put it in the Declaration? Isn't it all over the Declaration and then in the Constitution? Didn't they use that word constantly?
It doesn't show up anywhere. It's not in a state constitution, the American Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. That word is nowhere.
It's not even in our Communist Manifesto
no.
that the Democrats go for here in California?
Not at all. Not, because our Constitution guarantees each state a republic. Okay, so when each state has their Constitution put together, it's not a democracy. Now, the word democracy can be used to indicate the people have the ability to vote rather than a king or a dictator deciding everything. But the actual democracy only takes 50% of the people to decide what's going to happen and what's not.
50 plus 1, yeah.
Yeah. Our Constitution is written up in a different way. Everybody has certain rights that cannot be taken away because they come from God.
Amen.
Now, our government can take rights away from people after due process. Say, if you go kill somebody, the government can kill you. Rather than the government, a lot of people want to interpret that the government doesn't have the right to take your life. And so they're against the death penalty. But the way things are written, you can do that, but you have to go through this process. And we've got a very strong process that will defend your right to live, even after they can prove that you've done the crime.
You have a right to an appeal. You have
And
to,
another
you
right,
have to know
and another one, and another one.
Yeah, there's a whole list.
Exactly.
Rights of the accused in the Fourth Amendment. There's more rights you got in the Fifth Amendment. As we keep
Yes.
going through it, you will find a bunch of other spots where you have rights
And they're
that the
very hard to
government
take
can't
away.
take.
Yes. They can't just willy-nilly decide that, okay, tomorrow this is. Now, it's used wrongly to determine what you can do with your life. Like we've got the government telling us that supposedly by 2035, we're not going to be able to drive a gas-powered car. Now, that's actually something the government should not be able to do, and the federal government especially.
Well, that came from California, and through the transportation secretary, Trump said we're not doing that and poked big holes. So it's now a big question whether Lord Newsom, long may he reign, will be allowed to tell us how to live our lives in every aspect.
Exactly. Now, but that's the thing. California could possibly do that, but in our Constitution, the government has not been given the right to do anything like that.
Yes, but apparently the transportation secretary the previous one, had to grant some exceptions to the state of California for them to be able to have that mandate.
Okay, let me put it like this. I think if you go to Harvard today, you don't go to Harvard to learn the Constitution. You go there to learn how to get around it. Because the Constitution is very clear. Article 1, Section 8, these are the powers of the federal government. You can only do these things.
Well, powers of Congress.
Yes.
Not the whole federal government, Congress, the legislative branch, Article 1.
It's the laws that the government can make,
Yes.
which come from Congress. But they're given these powers, and these are the only things they can do. If you step outside them, then you're stepping away from the Constitution. And we long ago allowed our government to start making up rules that aren't covered by those 18 clauses in Section 8, Article 1.
And most of them have to do with the military.
Well,
More than domestic stuff.
half of them are military, and half of them
Little
are,
more than half are military.
Yeah, exactly. But it's split up between those two sections. But
So how does this get to Trump will destroy democracy? I mean, he tried in his first term and utterly failed. All we had was a good economy.
Exactly.
I'm confused.
Well, because it's their democracy. That's what the progressives are trying to get to. They want to get away from the restraints that the Constitution puts on them, so that if they decide something, that's the way it's going to be, and nobody can do anything about it. To do that, you have to get away from the Constitution. You can't do that and follow the Constitution. But they don't want to follow the Constitution.
Well,
they want this to be a progressive socialist or communist country where they decide everything.
Well, where a ruling elite will tell us what to do.
Exactly.
Now, we somewhat have that because we have not addressed these mega corporations like BlackRock that controls a huge proportion of, frankly, every company. You've got gateway companies like Google who control access to the internet. We need to break up these monopolies because they get in the way of the everyday man being able to succeed. So that's one of our problems. Our other big one is the liberal left prays to government, meaning they believe government is the solution, and if something's not working, the solution is to have more government.
Well, that's very true. In the Constitution, it basically is put together for the Constitution to stay out of our lives.
But that's the opposite of what they want.
Exactly.
Huh.
When you look at the Declaration of Independence, there's a part in there that most people are aware of. They may not be able to repeat it. The first part of it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." Now, you ask somebody to define that phrase. What were they trying to say? Most people have no idea what they were trying to say. What they were saying is we hold these, put the emphasis on that, truths to be self-evident. Not the truths that all the world has been living up to since then, the world at the time was run by kings. Wherever you went in the world, there was a Shah or a Khan or a Pharaoh or whatever name you wanted to call them. Somebody was one person in charge of everybody, right? Now, the way you became that person was either your dad was him and he died and you're the oldest son and you got it, or you went out and raised an army bigger than his army and killed him and took over.
Yeah.
That's the two ways you became king. From there on out, they got their authority by this thought of the divine right of kings, which basically says if God didn't want you to be king, he would have kept you from it. So now that you're king, it's also stamped with approval by every time a king went to the ceremony to be coronated. It was the highest ranking religious person of whatever religion in that area would put the crown on his head, giving the authority from God to the king, and
rather than to the people.
Exactly. Most of them operated under the assumption that they were going to protect your rights from God, but they had to come through the king to decide which rights those were. Okay.
So man would grant you rights rather than.
And yes. Now, so that's what that phrase means. We hold these truths to be self-evident, not the ones that the rest of the world, and then they went on to describe these truths. And the first one is that all men are created equal.
Which we failed a little bit at the start, but this was a new concept.
Well, yes, the point they were making, it wasn't racial. It was the aristocrats as opposed to the commoners. If you were an aristocrat, you could get away with murder if it was a commoner that you killed. But if a commoner did anything to an aristocrat, it would be very heavily punished. Okay? That concept was being thrown out the window. All men are created equal. Now, yes, it was not written to be racial, but John Adams, our second president, made it very clear that you can't say that and allow slavery, because now what you've got is two men with, rather than a king and a commoner, you've got a master and a slave.
And he was arguing that he was there at the foundation.
Yes.
He later became president, but he was arguing that there were a bunch of people on that side, but not enough to get the Constitution passed.
Yes.
And they decided that they had to live with this flaw in order to get freedom for at least most in a way that the world had never seen.
Yes.
We eventually fixed this.
It took a little more than half a century, but then that was changed. But that was the purpose of it, that you don't have aristocrats and commoners. And then it says that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now that means God gives you these rights. They don't come from anybody else. When you're born, you get these rights. And then it starts to list them. It says that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Well, it puts that word among in there, indicating it's not limited to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are other rights. They're just not listing them all. Okay?
Yes, but in our Bill of Rights, then they were smart enough to figure out that if we didn't enumerate those rights, they fell to the states or the people.
Exactly.
In other words, it's a document meant to enshrine the rights of the people and restrain government rather than empower government.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this again? Trump wants to destroy a democracy.
Well,
so we're getting some foundation, but I want to tie those pieces together because they're also calling him a fascist, and I want to address that too.
Now, see here, that set of words up to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A lot of people can't, off the top of their head, repeat them, but they're aware they're there. What really gets me is that if I was to ask you what's the next line, nobody knows it. Right? It's very hard to find anybody that knows what the next line, and this is very important. It says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. Remember, we hold these truths to be self-evident. So that's one of the truths they wanted to put in there, that the main purpose of the government is to secure your individual rights. That's its purpose, not to tell you what to do. And we've gotten away from that. And I think it's intentional. From the last century, schools, lawyers, nobody brings that phrase up.
Well, they don't teach civics.
They don't teach it correctly. They teach something they call civics.
No, a lot of states and a lot of places, they don't teach civics now.
Well,
There's not a civics course as a high school requirement.
but they teach their version of civics. It's usually some woke nonsense about whatever the thing of the week is, and everybody starts to believe this stuff. But if you look at those words in the Declaration of Independence, that's the foundation of our country. And if we don't follow that, we're no longer our country. So Trump's purpose as president is to secure your rights. Now, where the fascist starts to come into this, in my opinion, the big thing that the left wants, that Trump is, I guess, pushing against the hardest, where you might call him a dictator, is abortion. Okay,
That's one.
well,
I can think of some others, but
that's their up here.
that's
at the
one
top.
of their things that they consider to be, I don't know,
Unsaleable.
divine and holy, like sacrosanct.
Yes, yes.
So yes, that's a big one.
But take a look at the words in the Declaration of Independence. Okay, it can't be if if God gives you your rights when you're created, then He's giving you the right to life when you were created. Now, all this
Well,
argument.
not when government defines that it's actually a human.
Well, now, what's creation mean? Right? At the moment of conception, your DNA comes together, and that's you. And everything about you is figured out to what color your hair is, what color your eyes are, whether you got long, thin fingers or short, stubby ones, or your nose is crooked, whatever it is. What makes you you, what makes you different from anybody else, is defined in that moment. That's when you were created. So when you were created, if you were created with an undeniable right to life, I don't know how you get around that and think abortion's okay and still have any respect for the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
But they want open borders too. They want a global citizenship and a global elite to tell us what to do. There's another place. So Trump wants closed borders. He believes in nationalism, which is strongly linked to patriotism. If you're nationalist, we could describe that in a way as America first. And they're like, well, but we're not better than any other country, and how dare us? I don't quite get the reasoning. Obviously, the world wants to come here, so we're better in some ways.
Yeah.
We're a melting pot. There's more tolerance.
Well,
You can practice whatever religion you want here, including Satanism. I'm not okay with Satanism, but I don't want a law about it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of weeks ago, there was a congressional hearing on sanctuary cities. They had several mayors. They were sitting before all the members, well, not all the members, but the ones on this committee. And then we're asking them questions about that. And you sit there and you listen to the questions and the answers they were getting. They obviously knew what they were doing was wrong, but they were going to do it anyway. Well, in the midst of this comes, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but Ro Kahana. He's the
Rohana, I think.
Okay. He's the representative from the very south end of the San Francisco Bay Area, District 17. And
He's on the left for some reason.
Well, yes. He's from Fremont, Cupertino, Milpitas, part of San Jose, and Santa Clara. Okay, just at the very, very bottom of the bay. Now, recently he's gotten a little bit of attention as he's not the far left progressive that everybody else is, because he condemned the burning of the Teslas. But I guess we'll come back to this.
Well, we have to come back to this.
for a
We're going to
break.
go ahead and go to our first break. Got to make some money. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening on the social media, because right now the radio listeners don't get to hear me. Please like. Please subscribe. Sharing is one of the key things. If you like this message and you think that, hey, maybe you know a friend that would listen to this message, share it with them. Comment. If the comments are even halfway reasonable, I do respond. If they're just something that I'm just like, you're not on topic and you're screaming about something, I don't always respond. But otherwise, let's go ahead and come back. And this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Is Trump a fascist or a patriot? We look at his first term, and there was nothing but prosperity. And, you know, everybody I know, including the LGBTQ, they still seem to have rights. Because if they had all their rights taken, they wouldn't be able to complain so much. So they still had their rights. Kind of interesting. You were Bill, and I'm joined by Bill Scott, fellow constitutionalist. And you were talking about Ro Khanna.
Yeah.
So I'll let you finish that story.
He was in a conference, a congressional hearing on sanctuary cities. And I had mentioned that he's not as far left as a lot of people or a lot of
So he's from the conservative part of the Bay Area?
I don't know if you'd say conservative, but he didn't go so far as he was one of the few Democrats who condemned the destruction of the Tesla cars over the last few weeks.
Well, violence is okay if you're a fascist, right?
Sometimes it seems that way.
Well, but I mean, that's one of the elements of fascism is that they use violence to get their way.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, like how there was violence that was connected to BLM. There's violence connected to and bombing of the Tesla factories.
Yeah.
There was insurrections in various state houses where the left runs in and takes over. Why that even happened in Congress after January 20th, 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, they didn't talk about that being an insurrection at all. You barely heard about that in the news.
Yeah, and they keep a lot of things out of the news that nobody's aware of.
Or trying to shoot Trump, calling for Trump's death. We have a local college professor at Fresno State that has basically called for Trump's death.
Made up a coffin.
Yeah.
So,
well, Trump's the fascist? I'm a little confused.
Well, that's true. But anyway, he was at this hearing on the sanctuary cities, and he made what I consider an absolutely ridiculous comment. How can somebody be in the House of Representatives and not know this? He said, in most subjects, the federal government wants to pass the power down to the states. Like the federal government, Trump's trying to get rid of the Department of Education, saying that's better taken care of by the states than the federal government. So he was talking about that kind of situation where the federal government and Republicans want to move things back down to the states. But in this case, with the sanctuary cities, they want the power to make the decision. Well, the problem with his thinking is as we mentioned earlier in Article 8 or in Article 1, Section 8, there are certain prescribed what's the word I'm looking for? Enumerated
powers
things
that were given to the legislature. And then in Article 2, which deals with the president, he's also has a say on what happens with the border. So in two different places.
But the point is that is specifically addressed. That is one of the powers. Let me see if I can find this in here.
Well, Article 1 would be legislative powers, legislative branch powers that deal with immigration and citizenship. And then I forget where in Article 2, there's also some things that talk about, well, Trump is essential, or not Trump, the president, it happens to be Trump right now, has powers that are enumerated that have to deal with the border and law enforcement.
Here it is. Why do it?
That's the problem.
I should have marked this. But anyway, it specifically says, Article 1, here it is, the Congress shall have power, and it says Congress shall have power, and then it lists these things. And one of them says to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. So the federal government is given that. Now, to top that up,
So think of they create it, and the president's job is to enforce that.
yes. And then in Article 6, Clause 2, it says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, in other words, a law made within the confines of the Constitution, shall be the law of the land, and judges in every state shall be bound thereby, laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So the Constitution is very clear that when it comes to naturalization, it's the federal government that is in charge of this. It's been given the power to do this.
So sanctuary cities should not exist because
Not
they don't
created
have
by
the
the
power.
states. Yeah.
As opposed to education, it says a whole big nothing
It
about.
does,
You could maybe make a slight argument that promote for the general welfare, and that's what they've used to create things like the Department of Education. But that's so vague; it's not actually enumerated; it's hinted at.
It's
So
not.
they created a whole department out of almost thin air.
It's not even hinted at when you get down to it, because here's these 18 things that the federal government can do, and then you go to the 10th Amendment, where it says whatever it is that says that they can't do, that goes to the states and the people,
Yeah.
right? So the 10th Amendment basically takes away any thought that there's some way we can twist it around. So the states do have the power to control education over the federal government, but they don't have the power to control naturalization over the federal government.
Well, but Trump said he's going to be a dictator for a day. And they take the first part of that quote,
Yeah,
and then they don't say anything else.
yeah, exactly. Let's get to this word fascist. Okay, they like to throw that word around. And what in the world is a fascist? Okay, first of all, fascism is a form of socialism. And just
Wait,
look
so
it up.
the Nazis were socialists?
Yeah, that's what it says. Nazi stands for National Socialist Workers Party. So that's what it stands for. So they're socialists.
Huh.
But it was
But they keep calling Elon and anybody that drives a Tesla a
fascist.
Nazi
Yeah, well, yeah,
or a fascist.
yeah. This is
While behaving like a fascist, using intimidation.
it's just a word that gets thrown around. Okay. Take Trump. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you love him, hate him, you want to kiss him or kill him, whatever it is. First, last, and always, Trump is a capitalist. You can't deny that, no matter what you think of him. He is a capitalist. A capitalist.
Well, except that he loves his country more than most capitalist presidents because he actually lost money and didn't take a salary.
But the point of being a capitalist.
Now, he lost money because he didn't have the time to dedicate to his businesses.
Yes.
Most of the time, instead, they take backroom deals and book deals and things like that and come out maybe a little rich, but suddenly they're super rich by the act of being president. And Trump went in and lost money and gave away his salary.
Yeah.
That's unique in our history.
Yes, yes. But the meaning of capitalism is that the people control the means of production. Okay, that's the big difference.
Well, they make they control it by all the choices they make.
Well,
And they have a plethora of choices.
Capitalism is actually individuals owning and controlling the means of production. Okay? A socialist or a fascist believes the government has control of the means of production. Now, you might be able to own something in a socialist country, but the government still has the right to tell you all the little details about how you're going to run your business, which we've slightly been moving that direction over the last 100 years.
Well, that's because we have a regulatory state.
That tells us how
They've
to
tried
run the...
to create almost a fourth branch of government.
Yes.
Where rather than the legislators actually making the laws, the legislators still technically do, but the implementation of that, which might not look anywhere similar to the legislation, for instance, the EPA. They write a law and suddenly the EPA writes hundreds of regulations that maybe do or maybe don't have anything to do with the original intent of the legislation.
But that's
just one place. That's all over.
That's where we're going wrong, because it's the government taking control of the means of production. Now that's...
So Doge is fascist then, because it's bringing transparency.
No, Doge is taking the government out of this. We can get to that later, but here's the thing. The fascism is government controlling the means of production. Capitalism is the exact opposite, the people controlling the means.
Okay, but I remember Trump's first term, and the first thing he did was get rid of a bunch of regulations and give more power to the people.
Yes.
That's not fascist.
No, that's... Fascism and capitalism are 180 degrees opposite from each other. You can't be both. Either you're a capitalist or you're a fascist. You can't be both. It's like saying...
But when the left can identify it any way it wants.
That's what they do. But it's like saying when the sun comes up, it's going to get dark. It doesn't make any sense. Okay?
Well, neither does claiming that men can be women and women can be men. So
that's just part of their... Yeah. So... But you go back to Mussolini, who was the first one to actually introduce fascism to practice it.
This is in the 30s, pre-World War II in Italy.
And his description of what the government he wanted to run was everything for the state, nothing for the individual. Now compare that to the way James Madison described our Constitution. The rights of the people are many, the powers of the government are few. Again, two opposite, completely different philosophies. So Trump, if he's following one, can't be the other.
But he said he's going to be a dictator, and they just keep repeating that.
Yeah, I know. That's what
they say that, he's trying to purge the government and put in MAGA people. Well, he may put in some MAGA people. I won't deny that. But we have a bloated, inefficient government, and we're living beyond our means. So he's identifying ridiculous stuff and trying to get rid of the ridiculous stuff so that maybe we won't go broke.
Well, let's take
like a capitalist, in real business, they have to balance the books.
Budget, yeah.
And they don't.
They don't in the government.
No, because they can print more money.
Now, let's take a look at some of the stuff that's in the news. People are just all over Elon Musk because he's getting rid of jobs. Okay? He's getting rid of government jobs. Now,
aren't those the most productive jobs? Well, I guess if you have one, things are good because you got great benefits. You make generally more money than people in the private sector.
That's the thing. The government looks out for
their
itself.
Cash cow?
Now, take a look at the direction you're going. Let's say somebody closed the government down. One of these deals with the continuing resolutions, and they didn't get it voted on time, and the government gets shut down. Okay, what happens? Nothing.
There's probably there's some things, but Social Security still gets paid. Welfare still gets paid.
Yeah.
You know who gets screwed in that situation? Government contractors might not get paid on time.
Yeah.
In other words, the private citizens are the ones that get screwed if the government gets shut down. But the dependents of the state, they're not affected. Nor are the salaries of every one of those legislators.
The legislature's true. But now some of the government employees may not get their check.
On time.
Well, yeah. Here comes Friday. They don't get their check. Well, they're making the world's going to fall apart, right? But now if that was happened to you, well, I'm sure you've got enough credit that you can make it through a couple of weeks without your check. But those government employees, when they come back, they're going to get back pay. Mm-hmm. Now, how many people that were put out of business by the government during COVID got their back pay? None of them.
In theory, there was PPE money. There was basically government bribe money. Mm-hmm. But it still wasn't enough to save the businesses.
Exactly.
It was a pittance compared to just allowing them to live their lives in the country that has the most freedom in the world.
Exactly. Now, during the election, when when it was New Hampshire and I think it was Iowa, where they did the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire
primary.
Regular primary. Okay, on that day, Fox had done something a little bit different than what most of the rest of them had done. Rather than just quiz people on who they voted for to get an idea of, who was going to be ahead, they asked a few questions.
So it was exit polling, but a few more questions.
One of them was, do you think that the economy is doing better now or doing worse now or neutral? Okay, there were, if I remember right, it was in New Hampshire, it was 14%. In Iowa, it was 11% that said that the economy is doing better. Okay, now.
So this is
during the primary.
This is the primary in 2024. So March of 2024, approximately.
Yes.
I say March because California's March. Those two are slightly
ahead
earlier.
Of us. Yes. So 11 and 14%, Iowa, New Hampshire, actually thought that the economy was doing better. Who are these people that think the economy is doing better?
Government workers is my bet.
That's exactly it. Because all I know is when Trump was president the first time, me and my wife could go in and buy a basket of groceries, and it would cost us $150. This last year, it's $300. They keep saying that, the inflation rate's up maybe 12% or 10% or something like that. It's 100% as far as I'm concerned. We're paying twice as much.
It depends on what category, but within a lot of food stuff, yes, it's 200%.
Yes. And so where is the economy better? My insurance is up, my PG&E's up, taxes are up, everything's up, and I'm not getting anything more, right? Now, these government employees, and I don't know why this isn't as big a thing as it is. If you're in the private sector and your boss comes to you and says, well, this year I can only give you a 2% raise. Well, that's what you get, 2%, right?
Or you find another job.
Well, yes. But, that's all you're going to get.
But
now, if you're in the government, though, okay, you can get a 2% raise. Plus, they might give you a COLA.
Cost of living.
Yes. You get a cost of living raise and a raise. And they have a thing called step raises. At least in California, I don't know how it works in the federal government, but if you work for them for 3 years, you get a raise. You make 5 years, you get a raise. 7 years, you get a. All along the thing, there's a place where you get not a promotion. It's not that you're,
right.
you're
doing better
raise.
Work, or.
And if you get laid off for any reason, you will get back pay. On top of, you've got medical insurance that I can't even buy, right? You've got more holidays, more vacation days, more sick days, more personal leave days than anybody in the private sector gets. And
I'm self-employed, so my boss won't let me take any of those.
Exactly. And then on top of that, when it comes time to retire, you can retire at 50. Right? All you need to do is put in 20 years, and you can retire for full retirement benefits.
Well, I'd be okay with that if it was a cop.
Well, okay.
There's certain jobs I'd be okay with, but if you're an office worker, that's not physically dangerous.
Now, wait a minute.
Cops get injured all the time.
Yes.
So they get a little more slack.
But still,
the military, I'd give more slack.
Just because they can't meet the physical requirements, why should they get to retire at full pay at 50? I mean, they could still go in the office and do something.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? Because I can't touch my Social Security till I'm at least 62. And if I take it then, I'm going to get a big ding in how much I get. If I wait till 66 and a half, but take a look at what they give me for a raise compared to what they give the government for a raise in their pensions.
Well, we're going to go ahead and
go to
we're going to take our last break. When we come back, we're going to talk about collusion a little bit. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about Putin, collusion, and try to point out how Doge is creating some real moments of hope. Because I like to leave people, instead of going, oh my God.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and come back. And this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am joined by fellow Constitutionalist, Bill Scott. Welcome.
Hello. You wanted to talk about what Doge is doing.
What Doge is doing, but let's just touch a little bit about how, Trump is colluding with Putin against Ukraine.
Okay. This is
That doesn't
another
make
one.
a lot of sense to me.
Not at all.
I mean, he did pay those hookers to pee on a bed, right? Or was that all BS?
No, it's not just that. This is all about Ukraine. Okay. When Obama was running for his second term, he was caught on mic talking to the then president of Russia. It wasn't Putin. I don't remember his name. Medved or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was Medved.
And mic's open. He doesn't realize it. And he tells him, well, let's wait till after the election, and then I'll have more flexibility. Now, nobody explained what that was. I mean, the news companies were, what's he mean? What's he mean? Nobody explained that. But 2 years later, Russia invaded Crimea, and Obama did nothing about it. He let him do it.
Even though he said he was going to try to make them a member of NATO, even though he said he was going to use missiles to protect them and put in missile stations, and he did none of the things he promised.
Well, this is the thing.
What deal did he cut?
Is that what he was talking about?
Was he colluding with Russia? I think that Obama might have been colluding with Russia.
Don't invade him yet. Let's wait till after the election, okay? Well, like I said, he didn't do much about that. When Trump came in with that in mind, he sent the Ukrainians some anti-tank missiles and some anti-aircraft missiles, okay? It wasn't anything big, but it was now Russia's not going to easily be able to advance. Russia didn't do a thing while he was president.
No, they waited for the weak, incompetent, senile old man that cheated his way to the election.
He waited for Biden to get in there and embarrass the United States military more than it had ever been embarrassed before.
Well, Biden talked tough, promised things, and then slow-walked everything he promised. Oh, yeah, I'm going to give you this. And then 6 months later, they still don't have it.
Yeah, but he
gave them a bunch of money, which they need to doge because they can't account for any of it. Or very little of it.
That was the thing. The Russians seeing what's the word I want to use? How terrible Biden was with pulling out
is the word you're looking for.
That's probably it. Out of Afghanistan it's just his inglorious retreat it just told the world this is what kind of a president we have.
Right. It's open season now because this guy's not taking care of business.
So Russia went into Ukraine. Okay. Now, of course, all the Democrats trying to back Biden were making a bunch of speeches and so on, but they didn't do anything. They gave Ukraine some help, but not enough to stop the Russians.
Right. They gave them enough money, but they did not give them enough military help.
Trickled a little bit in here. Now, from the beginning, the Ukrainians wanted F-16s. They could have taken them in there right off the bat, shown them how to fly them, but no, they didn't do that until the last days of the Biden administration.
Well, Ukraine's a corrupt country, now run by a petty little dictator named Zelensky. There's no free speech. There's no freedom of the press. You're being conscripted. In other words, you're being drafted into the military service. I'm not so convinced that Ukraine's clean. That's not at all saying that I consider Russia to be good at all.
Well, this is exactly what the problem is. The Democrats are saying that Trump is picking Putin over the Ukrainian democracy. Well, they're not a democracy at all.
No, he canceled elections.
They're just as communist as the Russians are. That's what they are.
So the right solution is, how do we broker a peace deal and get the best of it that we can?
Yes.
Now, we mentioned Doge in that and how we need to actually have an audit. That's actually happening here. And we're running out of time, so I want to pivot to how Doge can make a difference in transparency, how we can begin to find out, well, wait a minute, are people actually eligible for things like Social Security? If you're an illegal, should you be getting Medicaid? Or in California, Medi-Cal, where there are billions of dollars in debt because we gave it to people that are not U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
It's not like they're coming and paying their own way. They're coming and leeching off the government.
Like you say, we don't have a lot of time, and I got a whole bunch of things on that.
So,
but
the hopeful ones.
A couple of weeks ago, there was a thing on TV where the new Treasury Secretary and one of the Doge people who had gone in to look at the IRS were being interviewed. Okay. The guy that was from Doge, his job is he goes into banks and takes their old computer system and updates them.
Oh, I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
So this is something he says that can cost as much as $20 million, right? And take 2 years to completely transfer the whole banking system over to a new computer system. And he said that with the IRS, which is where he's been asked to go do that, he compares them to a medium-sized bank. Okay, now the IRS,
the number of transactions and things like that.
Because the
employees.
IRS deals with everybody, but pretty much just once a year.
Yeah.
Whereas the bank is dealing with everybody every day.
Yeah.
So he kind of compared them to that. As he goes in and looks at it, in 1990, a project was started to do exactly that, and it was supposed to be done by 1996. Okay, here we are in 2024, and he says the people are still looking at having this done 5 years from now, since 1990, and it's still got another 5 years to go.
Well, that's government efficiency.
And they've spent $80 million. Or no, it's $800 million.
Yeah,
$800 million on this and all this. And they haven't done anything.
And this is one little sliver of the government.
Yes. And he's hoping to have this done in 2 years. Okay, now, the second part of this is the Treasury Secretary said when he got in there, he was just appalled by all kinds of things he was finding going on in the IRS. But the one that really got him is that, and he was saying that their goal is to collect money to, I don't forget the second one, but the third one was to provide customer service. Okay. He said when it comes to customer service.
IRS and customer service.
Yes.
That's funny.
But he pointed out, and think about this, that they have the same amount of people in customer service on the phones on Christmas Eve as they do April 13th.
Well, don't you look, it's a family tradition in my family where every Christmas Eve we each take turns talking to an IRS agent.
Well,
because that's where our priorities are.
Shouldn't there be a whole bunch more people in there April 13th with all these desperate people that know they have to turn their money in tomorrow and they got a question? I
think April 1st is the day that they should be full staffed.
Yeah, probably back in February. I mean, not everybody waits till the last minute. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's what Doge is doing. And they're doing the same thing with social. They're not taking money from me.
No, they're taking it from that 300-year-old woman. I can't believe they had the nerve to take that money from her. Well, or all the 150-year-olds that are still on Social Security.
Yes.
Look, this is a crazy world. We're running out of time.
Yeah.
Final thoughts.
Well,
because you're the one that came up with this idea, so I'm going to give you final thoughts. 45 seconds.
There is so much out there in the news that people, it's bumper sticker comments, right?
Yeah.
They sound good, but they mean nothing. All it takes is, I realize people when they go to work all day, they come home, they want to have dinner, go to bed, and get ready for the next day. Maybe spend a little bit of time with their kids if they get a chance. So all they hear from the news is what they get on the mainstream news. And they're not telling you the story. You've got to go out and look yourself. And there are people who are just bound and determined not to do that. And by doing this, we're just allowing our country to go downhill. We're losing the meaning of what our Constitution gave us. We should be proud of it. We should know it. Anytime you get a chance to point out what happens with the Constitution, do it.
Amen, brother. There's all kinds of opportunities to learn about the Constitution, learn about your rights, and make a difference.
Yes.
Get informed, get involved, make a difference.
And don't give it away.
Absolutely. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. We'll see you next week, folks.